I loved Wolfenstein The New Order, so the question is, does Wolfenstein II The New Colossus live up to the great standards that game set? Should you go out and buy this and add it to your Christmas stocking? Full disclosure, I received a copy of this game for review purposes, so I did not buy it. Please bear that in mind when listening to my review. Now, if for some reason you did not play the previous game, The New Order, you should just stop watching this video right now and go and watch my review for that game and decide whether you want to play that game first. This is a sequel, it does follow on. There are some story points you will probably want to have followed, and besides, that game was absolutely superb. If you like single player FPS games, you should have played Wolfenstein The New Order. It was hands down one of the best games of 2014. Wolfenstein 2 takes up the story directly where the last game ended, but this time instead of staying in post-war Europe, it moves over to the USA. It's still in the alternate timeline, the Nazis have won, and of course they are in firm control of America. You play BJ Blazkowicz, an American hero, a gun-toting Texan who stands for freedom, loves his dog, and probably uses apple pie for deodorant. He is such a cliche, it's ridiculous. You should hate him, but you don't. He's actually a really cool character to play. I actually liked the story in this game, I liked being BJ Blazkowicz, and I loved the sort of uncomplicated nature of his life. I mean, I wouldn't want to be him, but you really just had one task in life. And if you need to understand BJ Blazkowicz really, there are just two moments in this game you can focus on. This.
Ignore the pain. Ain't dead, so keep moving.
And this.
A lot of things you can do with a hatchet. And a Nazi.
Because that kind of encapsulates what BJ Blazkowicz is. He's an unstoppable force with a hatchet. And guns. Lots and lots of guns. So, that is the game. That is what you could probably have gleaned by watching any of the trailers, but is the game any good? The first thing I noticed about this game was it looked incredible. The graphics are superb. The textures, the lighting, the animations, everything about this game felt great. It's the sort of game where you start playing, you think, oh, that looks nice, and then you forget about it instantly. The graphics, they do their job perfectly. They set the scene, and then they don't do anything horrific to drag you out of the immersed state. The same is true of the sound, the guns, the explosions, everything just worked as it should. Of course, the music is great. I really love the soundtrack for this game. So all round, look and sound, this game just works very well. But what I'm far more interested in is how the engine works. I mean, when it's showing you these great graphics and it's playing you this great soundtrack, does it have frame rate issues? Does it crash? And I can tell you, for me, I never had a single issue. No crashes and no frame rate drops. It was absolutely rock steady 60 frames a second. Now, I didn't push it beyond that because I generally cap mine at 60 frames a second when I record, and I was recording a lot of the footage for this, so I can't tell you what it's like if you play at 120, but at 60 frames a second, this game was absolutely rock solid on my system. You can find my system specs on the YouTube channel. This game ran better than the first one in my opinion. And this is important because for an FPS game, what I want is a smooth experience. I do want something that looks nice and sounds nice, but I want a smooth, predictable experience that does not interfere with the gameplay. And of course that is the most important aspect of such a game, and games in general actually. So, what was the gameplay like in this game? To be honest, the gameplay's pretty much the same as it was in the first game, and that's not a bad thing because that was one of the great things in Wolfenstein: The New Order. So you're pretty much getting more of the same. You can approach this in a variety of ways. You can be stealthy, you can be a tactical fighter, and you can run around dual wielding shotguns and just blow everything up. It all works. However, I do recommend you don't get in love with one idea of how to play. If you're thinking, I shall play this game and play nothing but stealth, I would actually suggest you don't. You could do that, but my guess is you would probably have to do quite a lot of reloading. This game has a solid stealth component to it, but it is not a stealth game. You don't have any invisibility, you don't have any super abilities to evade your enemies. You can duck, you can hide, you can crouch and that sort of thing, but once you're seen, all hell is going to break loose, and if you don't want to reload, you're going to pull out the weapons you have at your disposal and start murdering everyone. And honestly, it works. Sneak when you can, blow everything up when you can't. There seem to be more difficulty settings in the second game, and I think they've cranked the difficulty up a little. I played my playthrough on They Call Me Terribilly, which is the setting below I Am Death Incarnate. I would normally play this game at that difficulty, Death Incarnate, but honestly the Terribilly setting was actually pretty good for me. It required that I pay attention, I couldn't mess around, I had to use movement and cover well, but it wasn't too brutal, I didn't die too often. However, if you're the sort of person who wants to just stand in the middle of the room with a giant cannon in your arms and shoot people wildly without taking any cover, you probably want to drop the difficulty. You are going to need to keep moving, use cover well, duck into other rooms, draw your enemies into your line of fire, that sort of thing, if you play at the tougher difficulties. And that's great for me, but they give you a range of difficulties if you want something a little easier. I can't tell you what it's like on I'm Death Incarnate. I may try a playthrough on that difficulty, but as I said, it seems to be a little tougher, a little less forgiving than the first one. One thing that was improved in the second game was the dual wield mechanic. In the first game, you could only dual wield two of the same weapon. In this game, you can actually wield different weapons in different hands, and of course that gives you a wider variety of potential tactics. Different weapons have different strengths at different ranges, and having the ability to shoot someone with a shotgun at close range and then quickly shoot something at long range with your armor-piercing rifle was very, very useful indeed. The only thing I would say about this is, honestly, I pretty much only used two weapons in my left hand, and that was the shotgun or the submachine gun. Generally that was my oh crap weapon, and by that I mean, you know, I'd be shooting with my rifle and then something would dive out close to me and I would lay into it with my left hand weapon. That is the weapon that does a lot of damage close up. The problem with the new system is the way it works, the way you select the weapons. When you initiate dual wield mode, it duplicates the weapon that you have in your right hand. So, you know, if you've got an assault rifle, you'll pull out another assault rifle. You can then change this by pressing one key and then holding it and using the other keys that you normally select weapons to change that. And so I would change to a shotgun, for example. However, it would have made a lot more sense and been a lot more useful and user-friendly if when you activated the dual wield mode, it just pulled out the last weapon you'd used in your left hand. Because for me that was almost always a shotgun, and occasionally I did change it to a submachine gun. It would almost always have been the right weapon, because that's what I was doing. What I would do is I would pull out the second weapon and then I would always have to change it. It was never the right one. So that was one of the little niggles that did annoy me. In the next game, assuming there is a next game, they should get it to remember which weapon you had. There is a perk system that will give you some benefits, some rewards, but you don't have to worry about it too much. You will unlock these as you play quite naturally. If you look here at the Battle Walker kills, I've got 32 out of 40 and a mastery rank of 1 that increases the amount of ammunition that I get from enemies dropped weapons. That basically a lot of little things like that. As you can see, most of them I've got mastered. You don't need to really try. If you're a sort of a min-max kind of person, don't worry. You don't really have to pay any attention to this. You will probably unlock all of these playing perfectly naturally. I played generally every mission. I started out in stealth, and then when it went to hell, I let it go to hell and I blew everything up. And as you can see, I've unlocked everything except the Battle Walker kills, but that's because I only just got that contraption towards the end of the game. And this one, enemy grenade kills, which I only managed to do once. I'm sure there's a way to do this if you want to get everything maxed, but honestly, for the vast majority of these things, just play the way you want to play and the game will probably reward you the way you should be rewarded. And you will almost certainly unlock all of them anyway. You will be able to upgrade your weapons as you go. You will find a lot of weapon mods out on various missions, and honestly, you can probably upgrade most things by the end of the game. I would suggest you focus on the weapons you use a lot. There are a few weapons that just feel better, at least for me, than others, and I focused on those. Don't worry too much about the weapon mods. You will find them pretty easily, and you will get enough to upgrade all your favourite weapons. And there were these things called contraptions, which are sort of wearable gadgets that you get access to about halfway through the game. They're a lot of fun, they're a great idea, but I can't help feel they were a little underutilised. And I think a lot of that comes down to the maps, to the way the levels were designed. I believe these items could have been a lot more useful and could have led to different play styles had the maps themselves allowed that. So let's talk about the maps, because this is where things begin to get a little less positive. There is a general feeling when playing this game that it is very linear. It's not always true. There are some areas, some maps where it's quite open and you have a lot of choices as to how to approach the situation. But there are also a lot of maps that really are completely on rails. And there are even some maps that are not. They are open enough to allow you a variety of approaches and yet somehow still manage to feel like they're on rails. Now, I'm not expecting a completely open world experience in my FPS games, but I do want to feel like I have some control. I am making some decisions as to how I progress through each level. This game just does not give me that option, or even the illusion of that option at times. For the vast majority of the game, I did feel a little like I was following a yellow line that had been drawn on the floor. And please, and this is not a request just for the developers of Wolfenstein, but for game developers in general, if you're going to put a barrier in a road or in a corridor, make sure that barrier makes sense. If I look at something and instantaneously know that's to prevent me, the player, going in that direction, you've kind of failed in your job. All of the barriers, all of the checkpoints, everything should feel perfectly natural. And finally, let's talk about the story. Now, in the first game, The New Order, the story was a big surprise because I was expecting a very generic FPS experience. And what I got was a great FPS experience with a great story. And Wolfenstein II seems to have taken that and, improved upon it, because the story in this game is really good. It's well written, it's well told, it uses good characters that I really did like.
My God,
Yes.
oh my sweet God in heaven, a working, mother-flushing toilet. I never thought I'd see the day. It's just, okay. I'm just gonna be in here for a minute.
And the cinematography is amazing. At times it feels like you're watching a movie. But, and here's the thing, this is kind of critical. In the first game, the story felt like icing on a great cake. In this game, because they focus so much on the story, the icing's a little thick. You have to dig deep to get to the cake. It's not that it's bad storytelling. It's not. It's superb. But there's so much of it, you often feel like it's getting in the way of the reason you're here, which is shooty shooty bang bang. Now, I know we often criticise games the other way round for having too much action and not enough good story and dialogue, but this is an FPS action game, and it really does revolve around the action, the shooting, the mayhem. The story is supposed to be icing on the cake, at least in my opinion. And I just think they overdid it. It didn't get in the way exactly, but it slowed the pace of the game down. And whilst I did love all of the cutscenes, they just seemed to be too big a part of the recipe. A big part of the problem is the experience is just too passive. It's not like in games such as Witcher 3, where you're having those dialogue moments that almost feel like cutscenes, but you are choosing which dialogue options to have, and therefore you are actually driving the sort of cinema experience. In this case, you are a passenger. You are watching the story unfold in front of you, and you have no choices. And honestly, it's just too much for this sort of game. So, in the end, would I recommend this game if you are an FPS game lover? And the answer is yes. It's a good game. It may not live up to the expectations we had from the previous game. It just isn't as good an all-round package, but it does have a lot of good things. The gunplay is great, the FPS fighting is fun, and I generally enjoyed most of my time in this game. In fact, I pretty much enjoyed all of my time, even though at times I was thinking, God, I really want to do more fighting. It wasn't because I wasn't enjoying the cutscenes. I did. It's just that conflict between enjoying what I'm seeing, but at the same time wanting to do something a little different. So if you approach this game with lowered expectations, you will probably enjoy it. It is a good game. As I've said, it is a good story as well as a good FPS game. It's just overall, they didn't get the balance right the way they did in the first one. Great ingredients, they just didn't follow the recipe this time. And if by some miracle the developers ever get to see this review, my advice to them would be pretty simple. You guys are great at making FPS games, and you're also great at storytelling, so I do not want to put down the storytelling aspect of your skill set. But for this kind of game, I think you focused way too much on that. You need to spend a little less time and resources on telling the story and more time and more resources on building a world, decent levels that are not as linear. You can continue to tell the story, but tell it whilst I'm fighting. We can listen to radio messages. There are plenty of ways of giving us story elements without needing to sit down and watch a cutscene. Don't remove the cutscenes completely, because you really are very good at them, and they did add something to this experience. But you need to focus a lot more on building those areas that we play in so that we really enjoy what we came here for, which was to brutally murder Nazis. Oh, and one other request. The side missions to kill Uber Commandos, I know I haven't talked about them in this review because they are optional. They were okay, but I would have liked to have seen tougher Uber Commandos or Ober Commandos, whatever they're called. I would like to have seen mini boss fights, you know, and not QTE style boss fights, but decent tough bosses that took a lot of damage, a lot of killing, so that I could use my skills at killing on an even tougher enemy, pit myself against something a little special. I would like to have seen something like that as well. So there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. My opinion is, if you are an FPS fan, you probably want to play this. If you are a fan of Wolfenstein, you're going to want to play this, but lower your expectations. It is a good game. It may not have lived up to the standards of the previous one, but it's still a solid experience, and I'm glad I played it.